Thank you to the presenters we had this morning. Before we get started with a couple of questions and answers here, I just want to let everybody know if you're interested in more Caneberry presentations, you need to check out the North American Raspberry and Blackberry Conference, which will be held virtually at the end of February, preceded by a 7-session Getting Started in Raspberries and Blackberries short course. So you can visit raspberryblackberry.com for more information and for registration. So that website again is one word, raspberryblackberry.com for more information and for registration. Now we do have a couple of questions here that have come in. Let me pull those up right quick. First one here, someone says they missed it, but where is Calvert Farms located?
Calvert Farms is located just outside of Dodge City, which is close to Coleman, Alabama. We're approximately 45 miles north of Birmingham on I-65. You would get off at Dodge City exit, and then his actual farm is a little community called Brushy Pond.
Okay. Next question we have, someone's written here. What is the latest ripening variety you have in development? How does its fruit quality and yield compare to Ouachita?
Okay, well, thanks for the question. First off, I want to say thanks to everybody for listening today. I couldn't see you, but I could feel you out there. So it's great to get a chance to talk to folks. You know, the later ripening is one of these areas that I'm not as pleased with some of my professional performance because it's been tough to get a good late ripening variety. Actually, our most outstanding late variety is Apache, released 21 years ago. Why it's outstanding? Because it ran actually a little later than Navajo. So some would say, well, Apache, I don't want Apache. And if you say why you don't want it, it's because of that white droop problem. Okay, so that's a problem that Apache had that was something that I didn't realize the severity of that. I suspect that Apache on the rotating crossarm trellis actually will do much better because a lot of the sunlight is blocked. Now, I'm working on later varieties, and I had a group of pretty good selections. None of them quite had the flavor I wanted, so I pulled back from them as far as releasing. I've got a new set of them now, but I don't have one ready to lay out there right now. I'm still trying to figure out about the post-harvest performance and the yield potential of these. They're kind of the next generation. Currently, the biggest interest I hear right now is about Vaughn from NC State as far as a variety that's Navajo seasoned later. The other thing that I tend to think of more now than I used to, and that is early primocane fruiting to actually come in that area. That's kind of a new thing under development. We have primocane fruiting blackberries that I picked on the 30th of June before. Now, no varieties, but they're coming. And I don't know if that's going to be the answer to not, because we need to heat that. But as we come along on this situation, I can see that they're possibly going to have certain things they're going to use for certain gaps in this season. Well, you said a lot of words, and you didn't give me the answer, and you'd be right.
Okay. All right. Our next question here. What is a good variety for a first-time grower in South Carolina?
I used to go back to what is the, Arnold, I'll mention this, but you may want to chime in too. You know, anytime someone asks me to grow, the first place I go is to the things that have been the most widely grown. And the most widely grown variety from Arkansas, currently of the newer ones, not new, but current ones, is Ouachita. It's exhibited coast-to-coast adaptation. However, I have people that tell me that rascal does not work for me, and so that's where you get very site-specific. So if someone comes to me right now and says, you know, I want to plant some blackberries, what should I plant? A couple of years ago, I said Ouachita, Natchez, and Osage, okay? Now I've added Caddo and Ponca to that, because what you find out is when you plant several varieties, you find out which one works really at your place. If you're choosing one, I would choose Ouachita, but I'd also ask around other people what's really working best. If you can stand it, go ahead and plant some of several of them. If you say, well, what would I plant more of? I think I'd go a little heavier on Washita, and then the other varying degrees of those. But it just kind of depends on how things work out. Sometimes season is an issue, and though if you want earlier berries, well, then of course Ponca and Natchez are earlier, or Primark Freedom even earlier than that. A lot of it depends on what's what, but Washita would be the one I'd say to plant first. But you'll find people that'll say, no, wouldn't do that. You don't know what he's talking about, and that might be true. Are you got a comment?
Yeah, I agree. I pretty much agree with you when Jeremy and I were talking about starting blackberries at his farm. What we did was we just got several different cultivars. We got Washita, Osage, Bond, Natchez. We also got Primark Freedom, and just sort of decided from that what fit best in our program, and it's gone from there. And we've also added the Caddo and the Ponca. And so I agree wholeheartedly with you that just try several of them and see what works best for you in your situation, and ask your neighbors around, see what they're growing, and go to that route. Because like you mentioned with the Freedom, we like Freedom, and nobody really ever mentioned it very much. And the reason we liked Freedom was it was so early in production. It was 3 weeks earlier than anything else, so that got us on the market real quick.
Okay.
If just to break in here, I know that Arnold asked a question when we were conversing before we started our session, and he's got to leave in just a few minutes. And Arnold's question, and other people have been emailing me this same question lately, and that is, how do you manage the training and pruning of Primark Freedom? Primark Freedom was the first thornless primocane fruiter that was ever commercially available, released in 2013 from the University of Arkansas. And when my target was for the home garden market, because there wasn't a thornless primocane fruiter. That was one reason. Secondly, it does not have post-harvest handling potential that's really good. You know, it's fine, but it's not a shipping berry. And also the yield on it was never at the same level as some of the others. So that's why I want to be careful about commercial use. I also mentioned it might be used for local markets. Now, what's really been in the last 2 or 3 years is a lot of people are growing Primark Freedom because of its early ripening. And that's what's got our attention, and he mentioned that in his presentation. It's about the earliest blackberry in our entire program, and that thing will come off for us sometime back up into May, and we used to not start till the 10th of June or so. So the earliness is key. However, it is primocane fruiting, and that puzzles people about what to do. What we do with it is tip it about shoulder high, and then, of course, then it branches, and we get varying degrees of primocane fruit depending on how hot it is. Okay, so after it does its thing there, that area is going to die that had those primocane berries. And so what you do in the fall or winter is cut right below where that flowering was, because that tissue will be brown and dead, and leave the rest of the cane. That's where you get the floricane crop, which is going to be early the next year. Okay, so that's the overall main thing to do. Now, I'll tell you, the amount of primocane fruiting you get is going to vary. The hotter it is, 90 and above, will really hinder that. And all of you kind of smile and say, well, it's 90 and above a lot, where most of you that are listening are. But that tends to hinder it to some extent. It just will shut the plants down from flowering. Primark Freedom is about the worst variety I've seen, and it's named variety, for having double berries and multiple berries, and that's an effect of heat, the bud formation that's occurring in some places. And so, the key to it is to leave the canes, but cut right below where that first summer flowering was, so you get the rest of the crop. It's not a huge yielder that way either, so you need to be aware of that. And Arnold, I don't know if that answers anything, but that's what we do here.
Yeah, that helped out. What we do is, or what we've tried is here lately is, we'll just keep tipping the branches and try to keep them branching laterally, and just kind of keep it from ever producing flowers, because we're not really after the fall production, and that seems to help.
Right.
Have helped some.
Okay. Now
folks,
we have a number
of that is a key thing. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say we have a number of other questions, and we've come to the end of our time. However, that basically says if you need to go to another meeting, this is probably your time to go do that. We're allowed to continue in this room to address these questions. So we'll go on forward if you like. If you have more you wanted to say on that last question, you can finish that up. Otherwise, people can go on, and we'll move on to other questions as well. Are we ready for more questions?
Yeah.
Okay. How is berry quality for firmness? And but one thing before you go, make sure you have signed out in that audience chat. You want to make sure that you get your credits. So make sure that you signed in and you signed out, and then we will now just continue beyond our scheduled time with questions. Next question is, how is berry quality for firmness and shipping for Twilight?
Well, I understand that Dr. Rafie was not able to join us. Is that correct?
Oh, it looks like he has not. Let me look and make sure on the list here. No, we don't have that one then. Do any of you have familiarity?
I'm not familiar with Twilight.
I have seen Twilight, I think, only one season. I can't remember if it was that or Eclipse, and so I really can't comment on that. So I don't think we have a good feel for that. The entire group of Twilight, Galaxy, and Eclipse, my suggestion to that, those of you that are in the eastern U.S., Southeast and all, is I think that I think I would plant some and see how they do, because having a dose of that Western blackberry genes in them, it just tells me, well, we want to see if they're adapted or not. Now, I believe the Geyer family, Ann and Pearson and Chuck, I believe they've got some of these up there in Northern Virginia, and they may have some firsthand knowledge of how they handle and how they're doing for them. But I don't have firsthand knowledge. When I tested Galaxy over the years, and I had it a number of years, one of the things that concerned me just a little bit is we had some anthracnose on it that was more than normal, and a lot of times when we plant the Pacific Northwest material, we can have some issues with that. But that was maybe an isolated case that's not a real good indication, okay? So the test is to be done, and I believe Dr. Gina Fernandez has tested them also in North Carolina, and there may be others. So there's probably some knowledge out there. We just need to get it out. Obviously, with Dr. Finn's passing a year ago, that probably interrupted a little bit of that flow of information. That's all.
Okay, our next question here was the issues with part of the berries being unripened in a specific cultivar, or was it across the plantings? I'm not sure who that's going to be.
Well, I think that was the picture that was shown in Dr. Rafie's presentation of the berry.
Okay.
Black at the and red down at the base. And
sure.
I can't comment on that specific variety doing that. I can tell you that's something I see. And of course, in breeding, I'm always trying to select away from that issue. We've got not varieties, but we have things programmed where the end of that berry will even get dull black before the bottom gets black. And when I find something like that, I start pouring Roundup cocktails and for a happy hour, it's time to get rid of that thing. But that is seen when at times I see it in name varieties at times. And so that's just something that would need to be noted. Now, I want to tell folks that the environment in Oregon is very different from our area in the South. And so, you can take a plant to a different region and it can perform different ways. So that's something to look out for, but it is possible it was just an isolated thing, will not be seen again.
Okay. The next question, are there any notable disease tolerances for the new Arkansas selections?
Well, that's kind of like asking which ones you're going to make money on. Depends on which disease you're talking about. our blackberries in Arkansas are developed, we use the same methods. We don't spray a lot, trying to keep the natural resistance in these things. But we don't have all the same diseases that everyone has. One of the number one issues I see is that I'm not sure that we have cane blight or much of it, because I don't know that what cane blight looks like in our field, whereas folks in Carolinas and Georgia talk a lot about it. So immediately when I hear something like that, I think, well, I may not know what I'm doing, but most importantly is if we don't have a pathogen to screen against, we're not going to select resistant plants. So overall, the Arkansas material has generally the same disease resistance profile as far as I know, because they're all handled the same. And I guarantee you, we throw away most everything we produce. And that's what breeders do. They're trash makers because of various problems, including diseases. Now, if there's a specific disease question or something, I would try to address it, but I may not know the answer because we may not have the problem.
And we don't have a lot of issues with disease either. I think we're far enough north that we don't have some of the issues they have down south. And sometimes we used to see some cane blight early, and that was probably because we were pruning with pruners versus the soft pinching. And since then we've switched to soft pinching, and we don't have as much of a problem with it. Other than that, we don't have much of a disease issue, I don't think.
Okay. Regarding the issue with part of the berries being unripened in the east-west crosses, was it in a specific cultivar or was it across the plantings? This symptomology looks similar to red berry mite damage.
I've never really noticed the none.
Well, again, Dr. Rafie.
Dr. Rafie.
Yeah,
okay.
But they was talking about, I think it was your Eclipse or Twilight, one of those. Again, anytime you see that red and black, and most of you have not seen red berry mite damage, that's something to catch one's eye. And I was taught years ago in California to grab that berry and squeeze that red area. And if you squeeze it and it's almost crisp when you smash it, that's a surefire sign of berry mite. And so I couldn't tell from the picture it was berry. You can't look at a picture and know what it is. You'd have to feel it, or at least I would have to feel it. And I'm not sure I'm that good with it. So it's hard to say. If I was going to put $5 down one way or the other, I'd put it down. It would be a mutation issue or a seasonal issue as opposed to red berry mite. But maybe up there where Dr. Rafie has these plants, maybe they got a bunch of red berry mite. I don't see that commonly unless I go to California.
Okay. Will genetic engineering come into cultivar development in the next 5 years?
Well, when anybody starts to answer with well, that's kind of like so. Better watch out because you're fixing to find out something that may not be on the money, and that's the way the answer to this goes. When you say genetic engineering, a few years ago, genetic engineering was genetically modified organisms, or GMOs. And as some of y'all heard me say, I don't even want to admit to knowing how to spell GMO. Now, you're supposed to laugh, okay? And that's the problem with these Zoom things. You can't hear anybody laugh and can't see any smiles.
Yeah.
But really, these days, what we're talking about more would be the CRISPR technology, or gene editing, where the altering the DNA sequence would be much more precise and would not involve the old transformation that usually involved what we call GMOs. And our government regulators indicate that CRISPR or gene-edited products would not require the same sort of testing and registration that GMOs did. Now, that said, I'm aware of gene editing interest in the Caneberry community, and I understand that work is going on in that, but I don't want to get too far into saying too much about it because it's not something I'm involved with. And so from a thing that creates genetic variation that can be beneficial to the consumer or the grower is something to keep an eye on. It has great potential. Anytime you can bring in new traits that you don't have, that has a resistance to an issue or improves the flavor or maybe affects some aspect that you just don't like cake seeds or something, that would be a benefit. Let's flip over here to the other side, and here I go into the product development mode, which is where I spend most of my time. I'm breeding for Arkansas growers, and I'm breeding for all you folks that are there today, but also our varieties are used around the world. And I do not want to get into a situation where a variety or the perception of a variety or a perception of a program or a perception of a crop would potentially damage the use of that crop. And so in our berry community, in general, people have been concerned about that. Will times change? Well, of course, never say never, ways either, and we'll see what's going on. We have papayas and we have non-browning apples, and I understand there's a new pineapple that are GMOs, and those are approved for use, and there may be acceptance of those. The papayas, I understand, are very important. And so I think it comes down to whether people would accept that and the value of it. So again, a lot of words dance around the topic. May happen. We'll see.
Okay, this is from Gina Fernandez. In general, the USDA Oregon group has done better than anything else from that breeding program, but we only saw 5 plants of each. We're hoping to put in some on-farm trials in 2021 and should know more in a year or two. Trials will be in Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Let me know if you're interested, and I can coordinate additional sites. So I guess that's not so much a question.
That's really valuable information. Gina, thanks for chiming in on that. And there's one thing else I want to mention about these. In looking at the data and looking at what I've seen so far, they seem to run later than a lot of our material, and we're really interested in later varieties. So there's a key there. A grower will put up with something if there's something that will ripen a couple of weeks to carry the season. And so that's a key thing to keep in mind. Let's hope that the answers can come forth on which ones or if all of them are adapted.
Okay. Given the aggressive temperatures and disease pressure late season, let me try that again. Given the aggressive temps and disease pressure late season, what would be the most ideal for late season production in the Southeast? A late floricane variety or a very good productive primocane? Why or why not?
I'm going to say it depends on where you are. My observations in, say, southern Georgia is you'd hardly get any primocane crop no matter what. Maybe a few berries way late, but it would be enough to mount to much. And so thinking there is probably as late as you could go with a floricane variety. Now, when we start moving more northward, and so, for instance, I don't know if Mr. Jeff Krotz is on this session today. He's had what he would call very good success, again, in his opinion, with Primark 45, near Lincoln, North Carolina. Now, he does not get as big a yield necessarily on the primacanes as he did on the floricanes, but start combining price and the extension of season, how you're marketing, those are key things. So for the deep south areas where primocane fruiting is not working because of the heat issues, I would think later flora would be the key, okay? In those areas where you can get a primocane crop, well, then primocane potential is good. Now, when I use the word potential, some of that is realized in some place and sometime in the future. As I mentioned just a while ago, we've got a primocane fruiting selection that I've had ripe berries on the 30th of June in Clarksville, Arkansas. So that's a little bit same latitude as Raleigh, Nashville, just north of Little Rock. And so that is something that we've been able to move the season earlier, okay, such that it has primocane berries that are just rolling the floricane crop. But you got to be in a spot where you can get that thing to fruit. okay? And so when you take Primark Horizon that I talked about, you know, it'll start in for us somewhere around the 1st of August, and it'll go for a long time. And so, you know, it's a combination of where. So if I was in the business trying to figure out what to do, I would test the primocane fruiters and see what do they do on my place, and will they work time that I would be testing like some of these newer varieties that Dr. Fernandez mentioned from Dr. Finn's program. And also keep an eye out for new things from here that I hope we will have that would be more in the Navajo Vaughn season, something like that. So that's about the best I can say right now.
Okay. Another question here. Where is a training program online for Kiowa?
Well, we've got a variety called Kiowa. We also got a variety called Caddo. Now, if you want to go sit on the beach and fish, I think a Kiowa is where you go to do that. And I don't know where Caddo came from, but, you know, that's a good question. Kiowa is thorny, so most folks head to the other side of the house when you start talking about Kiowa. You know, the most outstanding system that I ever heard of for Kiowa was Dr. Arlie Powell, who used to work for Auburn University, retired, and down outside of Montgomery, Alabama, had a very nice system that he used to train Kiowa, and he said that it just worked like magic, and folks didn't pay attention to the thorns. So anytime you can get someone not to pay attention to a thorn, you either got something really handy or you are a smooth talker. And if you could go and check online, see if, I think Arlie had a video or something or other about how to grow Kiowa and train the canes. I think it took a good bit of training, but otherwise no one is growing Kiowa widely now because it is thorny and it's not a shipping berry. So you might check for Dr. Arlie Powell, Powell, online, and you probably could find a contact for him. I bet he'd be excited to tell you about how he did it.
Okay, just a couple more questions here. We are in need of later ripening floor cane varieties to help extend the season. What is the status of potential late varieties from Arkansas?
Well, as I mentioned earlier in the question answering, I had about 3 of these I thought were about ready to go, and they just didn't quite match the quality. I think as time goes on, I've gotten more picky about what I'm willing to eat. And all of them have exhibited a tartness level that was higher than I was happy with. I feel like to build the industry, you got to make the blackberries better, not make them more challenging, particularly to go eat them fresh, not make them pies and such. So this basically the next round of selections, advanced selections, the ones being taken. Now, we've got the first year data from some of these, got some more that will be picked for the first time this year in 21. And usually that means a 2 or 3 or 4 before release, just simply to find out if they really are good. Some of them look really good. Some of them, they were younger, so it's a little bit hard sometimes to tell what they're doing. Some of them, I was concerned about the yield potential of them, because I don't want to put something out there that somebody says is great, and then they put it out there and it wouldn't make enough yield. So I think that we're probably at least 3 years out. You run this thing back, this tape back, or this video back, and say, well, you don't know what you were talking about. You won't be able to catch me because Dr. Worthington will be in charge of all the blackberries in 2 more years. And, you know, and she's pretty smart, and she may be able to pull a rabbit out of the hat when all I've done is just stick my hand down in there. So they're coming, I think, okay? But, you know, it's been more elusive than I thought. It used to be that all we wanted to do was move blackberry season earlier, and Dr. Joe Moore, my predecessor, wanted to bump blackberries up against matted rose strawberries, and the closest he got was Choctaw. It would come in just about with matted rose strawberries. The thorny material all ran later. Notice Navajo is really late because the germplasm was late, and so we pushed the thing, all of our program earlier, and Arapaho was a real breakthrough. Now, this is kind of like a big old ship. You got to turn that thing around and head the other direction and pull the season back later. That was a certain amount of genetic momentum that had to be shifted. And it's created a little more of a challenge than I thought. Stanley Scarborough, back years ago when he worked with Sunny Ridge, was the one that said, we need late varieties. And I just kind of looked at him and I said, what? And I said, well, I'll get started on it. But that was years ago. So we're working on it. But there's not an answer that I'm going to hand you. I might have a better idea in a year.
Okay. I believe we've come to the end of our questions at this point. That should finish us up. Just want a reminder one more time, if you're interested in more caneberry presentations, check out the North American Raspberry and Blackberry Conference. It'll be held virtually at the end of February, preceded by a 7-session Getting Started in Raspberries and Blackberries short course. Visit raspberryblackberry.com for more information and registration. And I'm looking to see if there's any more questions. There's not. And if there's no more comments, I believe that finishes up our session. Make sure that you have signed out to get your credits. And I believe, unless there are more comments, I believe that does it for today, for our session anyway. Thank you.